you're the owner of Caribou Recording a studio in Midlothian.
That's right. Yeah.
Where about in Midlothian?
So it's near. It's just south of Edinburgh, kind of on your way to Peebles, near Pennycook. It's on a little farm, and there's it feels very rural. There's a couple of ponies there and lots of rabbits dancing around.
And what kind of bands do you record?
Well, mostly. I mean, we can kind of do anything, but most of the people that come or things that I'm involved in are kind of roots music related, singer-songwriters, folk music, jazz as well, and not a lot of young rock bands, but we'd happily have them as well. We just did a youth project actually with some school kids, some rocker school kids. That was really fun. Yeah.
Now you're a well-known musician yourself. Do you feel that it helps you helping others in the studio?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, 100%. Making records is about being comfortable. So, if you've got somebody, I guess, on the other side of the glass that is a musician, and I've been a session drummer since I left high school in 1990, so it's a while now. But I mean, I really love making records, and I love helping people make their records. And I was really fortunate when I was young. I worked with some really great people, and I worked with some not so great people, and a few emotional things happened to me when I was young that I wouldn't want to see happen to anybody else, So I really like working with young and inexperienced people sometimes. Sometimes they're the funnest ones to work with, because they're open and they want to learn, and they understand how creative a recording can be, and then there's seasoned people that get that as much as I do or more, and then we can really get inside something, and that's really creative. But I think being a musician is really, I mean, you kind of know what they're going through emotionally, and making records is a really emotional thing. I mean, that's what we're trying to capture is an emotion, and we're trying to make that into something that when it hits someone's ears in 2D, as it were, that they feel something. I mean, that's what music is about. That's why live music is so great, because it's a proper experience. It's a 3D thing, but we're trying to get that onto, something that isn't as impactful, because it can be anywhere, right? I always say it's the difference between a play and a movie, and for a very, very short time in high school, I was an actor, and I did plays, and then I started to try and get some work, in films and all that kind of stuff, and the things that I was told, that all of a sudden these big gestures, that you would do on a stage, even as a musician, if you do those in a studio, it can sometimes be too much, but it's the small things. It's the delicacy. It's those little intricate things that in a studio, that's where a studio really blossoms, because you can turn that stuff up. You can compress something so that stuff is and that's the beauty, when you can hear when I can hear a singer's breath in my left ear or something, it's like, and it's like they're whispering into my ear. That's the stuff that makes me want to listen to it again and get inside the music and hear everything else. So that's what I'm trying to do. It's all about a feeling, It's about an emotion.
So you're originally from Cape Breton, Nova Scotia?
I am, yeah.
And when did you start playing music over there?
Oh, I suppose I started to play when I was about 12. I think I used to. Before that, I used to smash on the sofa and stuff like that. But when I was 12, I worked on a farm up the road, grading eggs and shoveling shit. But I got enough money to buy a really bad drum set. I don't know why. I just kind of gravitated to playing the drums. My brother, I'd done piano lessons and guitar lessons and stuff, and it didn't grab me when I was that old. I mean, I wish it had now, but it didn't. So I decided that I wanted to try some drums, so I bought some drums, and kind of just started to play. So all through junior high school and high school, well, so you would call that secondary school here. I lived way out in the country. It was like, and with my folks going to work, and then I was always the first one back home. So for an hour, I would be back home by myself. So I would practice for at least 2 or 3 hours. My mum at the time was doing a morning radio show on CBC, which is like the BBC but in Canada. She would get home at about 3, or 4. So after I'd been practicing for about an hour, and she would always have a nap because she left for work at 3 in the morning. But she couldn't sleep in the afternoon unless I was practicing. So I was really lucky that way. And I would just practice. I had a tape deck shoved between my legs, headphones, playing my favorite records. And I guess I got my time really good that way. I didn't know that I was doing it, but that, it was just kind of an accident. And I would play pop records, but I would also play Rush records and learn things in 13/8, not knowing that it was 13/8. You know what I mean? But just like, I wanted to learn that thing, so I would learn it.
And when did you join your first band?
Well, me and my brother started the band when I was about 16 or 17. And we started to play in bars. We started a cover band. So we played the top 40 at the time. And then we started to write songs. And we finally made an album and we released it in 1990, which was the year that I finished high school. I think it was 92, because we toured for a couple of years, me right out of high school. My guidance counselor at high school was very annoyed that I didn't go and study jazz like I told him I was going to, but I had too many gigs.
So we first got to know you through Viola.
Oh yeah.
Where you used to come over to Scotland touring. When did you start with that band?
I think that was it was the end of the 90s, early 2000s. And I wasn't into folk music when I was a teenager at all. I was going to be a rock star, that's what I was. There was no question in my mind. That didn't happen. But I got into folk music by playing with Ashley McIsaac. I was in his first band. I didn't spend a lot of time there, but I did do the very first tour where every major record company from all over the world there would be a new batch of them at every gig, and we hadn't even rehearsed. We were just like, it was totally ridiculous. But I got into folk music that way, and Cape Breton traditional fiddle music, and of course, and then I ended up playing with Mattie and the Bear McNeils and the Rankin Family and Bruce Guthrow and kind of all the folkies and singer-songwriters and playing on fiddle players albums and really getting into it, and then really getting into Irish music and spending a bunch of time in Ireland with Leisha Kelly and Sharon Shannon and Mary Shannon and Morella Murray and that whole Galway scene, hanging out with Alan Kelly and Sean Smith and that whole bunch of really amazing musicians and really fantastic people. Let's start a traddy band, because there wasn't any instrumental trad bands in Cape Breton. There was plenty of bands, not plenty, but there was a few bands that kind of mixed songs and tunes. But there wasn't a Lunasa from Cape Breton, right? And that was what I wanted. So I wanted to make a Cape Breton version of, a great traddy band. We kind of started it, and I thought I'd kind of pushed it as far as I could, rhythmically, and in being in that scene, I came to Scotland more often. Was just involved with more people here and got to know what was going on here, and I saw the whole thing that was happening around 2000. The thing that was happening in Edinburgh, particularly mixing folk music and jazz, and I was spending a lot of time at home practicing. There was a stage at that point where I was practicing 6 hours a day, stuff that I would never be able to play with anybody there, because nobody was interested, basically. And that's, I don't blame anybody for that. Do you know what I mean? It's just I was into something that there wasn't really anyone else really into in Cape Breton. It's a really small place, and it's fiercely traditional, which I think is a great thing, But for me, there was a thing happening in Edinburgh, There was Aidan and there was John Ray and the Bancroft twins, and there was Dave Milligan, and there was a bunch of stuff happening. It was like, that's more my thing. And then, so I was really into instrumental music, I was really into jazz, I was really into folk music. Where can I do those two things? There was only one place in the world, and that was Edinburgh. So I moved there. Ian MacLeod of Shugal Nifty said, well, if you really want to do it, I got a spare room, you can live with me. And I thought, what the hell, let's give it a shot, And then a year later, I met a singer-songwriter, and that was Corrine Pollard. So we made a bunch of records together which brought me back straight into singer-songwriter world, which I guess is where I'm very comfortable, and I guess that's my mum's a singer-songwriter, and I understand that thing.
So when did you first get into production?
Really, just before I moved to Scotland 16 years ago. I had done a couple of things. I spent a lot of time in recording studios. So my brother owns a studio, and the other guy that was in that band that didn't make it, Gordy Sampson, he owns the studio. So if there was any studio drumming to be done, I ended up doing it at that time. And I also ended up just hanging out, and Gordy had started to produce records a few years before that, and he used to do this thing where he'd be like, what are you doing next week? And I would tell him, I had nothing to do or whatever, and he'd be like, well, we're doing this thing in Toronto, so you should come up, and I just used to hang out with him. And I mean, he even had me hang out at Master Disc or Sterling when he mastered a Natalie McMaster record with Greg Calby in New York. He's like, yo, you got to come to New York and hang out. And I think what he was doing was just giving me a bunch of experience. And I would sit quietly in the corner most of the time, but if I had a little idea, I always knew that I could whisper it in his ear, and then he could say it, and he would look good because it was a good idea. He would only say the good ideas, of course, which is a good thing. but then I just, when you start to think of things in that perspective of how is this recording going to be more successful, not financially, but just a successful recording, a successful piece of music. It's great. That it was just the beginning of me thinking about, the palette and how to use it. So when I came to Scotland, and Karina and I got together, and she was about to make her first solo record. She had made a couple of records with Battlefield Band and Malinky, but she wanted to make a solo record, and just the kind of, she asked me to just be in her band, and then we ended up getting together, and I ended up producing that first record, and then subsequent ones.
What was the first record called?
Fault Lines.
How many Green Polar albums did you produce?
I think it's 5. I co-produced one of them with Callum Malcolm, This Earthly Spell, and then Traces, her last one, I recorded, but it was produced by somebody else who was fantastic, really great, and I think that's actually her best record.
And of course you've gone on to produce many other things.
Uh-huh.
So who are you currently working with?
Well, I just did a record with a young fella called Morris, who lives in London, from Lincolnshire, kind of rootsy singer-songwriter-y thing, really good. The lovely Rachel Newton, I play in her trio and her band, but I made all her 3 solo albums with her. I also do this series of videos with Sorley McDonald. We call it Caribou Live. So a band will turn up at the studio, set up, and we record live. Sorley sets up a bunch of cameras, and then we'll do a couple of pieces of music. I'll mix them that day and master them that day. So the next day, Sorley will edit up some videos, and then they can use them for Facebook posts, because that's the world we live in. Yeah, but there's always a bunch of things going through the studio, whether it's one day here or 2 days there. There's a nice kind of mixture of young people, older people. I get a lot of, I'm 50 or 60 years old. I've never made a record. I've always wanted to make a record. Could you help me make a record? And those can be really fun. You're kind of guiding someone through this process that, and they're mature and developed, and they can see a world that they've always wanted to see, and you can help them see that. Which is the same buzz that I get from a band that's really young, that's never recorded, and comes to the studio and kind of finally hears themselves through a set of speakers, because I really never know what I sound like as a musician unless I'm hearing it through speakers. You can play something and you can feel something in a room and all that, but you don't really know how it sounds until you listen to it through some speakers.